Jake Seeley, that's this idiot talking. Joe Holka and Chris Meany, we're here. It's the DFS Footballers Podcast for you guys, DFS for the rest of us. As a reminder, if you're not part of the DFS package, you can get 10% off with discount code podcast. You can check out Chris Meany's article, my article, tons more to help you get ready for DFS Week 10. I don't even care how good we did, guys, because I spent my weekend in Notre Dame. So that's why I got the hat on. It was amazing. It was wonderful. I know I finished second, though. I do know Chris was in dead last.
Yes, and the big takeaway from that, I mean, I feel like I had a decent showing, right? When we were all over that Miami and Jets game, Marvin Jones, Zach Ertz, but I did not play Christian McCaffrey like you guys did, and then that's the bottom line. If you fade McCaffrey in cash in a small contest, you do not win, and that's exactly what I wrote in the DFS pass this week.
Should we just start off if I can just give all of our listeners permission to play Christian McCaffrey this week, since I feel like some people just I think they need that extra push for some weird reason. You just going to continue to watch this guy score 2 touchdowns a week, and I don't know. I guess I'm going to give everyone permission before we even talk about his price that it is okay to play this guy. Like, you can make it work.
Give permission.
Yes, get him in there.
The entire show every single week is, all right, let's talk running backs, Christian McCaffrey. It's just, we could just skip right past it.
We were talking about when he was like 8K.
Yeah.
No, well, in all intents and purposes, I'll ask you this, Joe, before we get to cash. At what price do you stop? He's now at 10.5 on both sides. We're not talking cash just yet, because I want to talk about this just more in game theory. Like that, the reason I always bring up Russell Westbrook is because Chris knows this. He got to a point where it eventually was cost prohibitive. Like, you could not make a lineup. It was so bad. Like, what are we waiting for? 12K?
So it's definitely a slate specific thing, right? I mean, depends on what the pricing is like. I mean, so pricing was so tight on DraftKings in particular last week. Like, that's what you have to worry about. It's not even so much how much Christian McCaffrey costs, but let's just say this. Like, I'm considering, even when he was on his bye, like, trying to figure out a way to get him in my lineup because I think you have to have him most weeks if you want to have that floor ceiling combo that we value so much at the position. So, yeah, I mean, I think that maybe we'll be talking about this in a couple weeks and he's 12K, but I mean, just because he's 500 more this week on DraftKings, he's expensive everywhere. Like, if you make it work, I still think that's the right play overall.
Is there a threshold you're thinking in your mind, Chris, where you're going to be like, oh, wow?
I mean, maybe like 12.5. Well, I mean, I played him everywhere. I avoided him in your in this little 3-man contest, because you both had him in there. But yeah, we've been saying every single week to play this guy. It's absolutely silly. If you faded him at all, you haven't won, because every week he does this. Even the games against Tampa Bay, when he wasn't efficient on the ground, he was catching balls through the air and finding the end zone with receiving touchdowns. So it's every single week, and this matchup is awesome. Everybody is absolutely running all over Green Bay. Look at last week. The Chargers had no success all year running the football, or especially since they had Melvin Gordon, and they were able to control the line of scrimmage against Green Bay. So I don't know, 12.5. There was a point a couple of years ago when Bell and DJ were balling out. They were both in this range, and I was still playing them, and I was, advising everybody else to still play them, and they were returning value at that price. And just look at DraftKings. Aaron Jones is second on the slate with 21 fantasy points per game. CMC has 33. Like, it's a huge gap. There's nobody else close.
There isn't. All right, so let's do it. Let's talk some cash for this week then.
Straight cash, homie.
So, Joe, are you using Christian McCaffrey this week?
I'm going to give myself permission to play Christian McCaffrey this week. No, I mean, I think one other thing, too, and we don't even really need to talk too much about. I mean, he's a great play. There's really not a whole lot to say about him. The matchup, yeah, I don't really care about any of that. But more often than not, like, when we have a week like last week where I think a lot of people just paid for Dalvin Cook for 500 less on DraftKings and then got burned. So all those people, they're all playing Christian McCaffrey this week. So I think that's something to think about from a cash perspective. We have a ton to pay up for at wide receiver if you wanted to go that route as well. But yeah, I mean, anytime you're starting with the type of floor that you're going to get with CMC, I think it's totally fine in cash games. So starting cash games with him, I think that's totally fine, of course.
Do you want to guess where he is in projected ownership?
I would imagine all the Dalvin Cook ownership went his way. He's got to be number one on the slate, right? Maybe behind someone like Mike Evans.
You're incorrect. Oh, well, I'm talking just at running back. He's not even number one at running back.
Yeah.
Chris, you want to take a guess?
Where he is?
Yes.
Oh, geez. Does the price really bother people?
Just take a guess.
5.
You are closer than Joe because he's fourth. He's behind David Montgomery, Devin Singletary, and Marlon Mack.
Montgomery.
What are people doing?
I do like Montgomery this week, but it's just the first time we're probably going to talk about Montgomery all year, and he's chalky, which is kind of annoying, but I get it.
Well, so how chalky is he? Because I don't trust him yet, and for that price, I just don't see why you just don't take Singletary.
Agreed. I like both of them. I mean, Montgomery and Cash, I won't go there. We can talk about him now if you want, but I think in tournaments, I mean, he's trending up. The matchup is amazing, and he's got 48 touches in his last 2 games, so he's at least getting that. And you saw it last week against the Eagles. Tough run defense, but he was still able to find the end zone a couple times. So he is the goal line back. That's one thing that's for sure. If Chicago could ever get in the red zone.
So between the two, Joe, would you go Montgomery over Singletary because of what he just said, and the fact that something that I mentioned to Chris on our athletic podcast is I said Devin Singletary runs the risk of being Matt Forte from years ago, where he just gets vulture. Even though Frank Gore went 0 for 3 getting stuffed at the goal line, it still looks like Frank Gore is the goal line, whereas at least David Montgomery is the one. But on the flip side, David Montgomery is not so much in the passing game where Devin Singletary is. So do you feel better about one than the other?
I mean, I don't love either guy, but I understand that the price is going to make it necessary in some builds. I think that I would lean towards Montgomery for the exact reason that you said. Like, there's always going to be that scare that Gore is going to come in and take your touchdown away. And, like, it might look a little bit different in terms of touches over the last couple weeks in favor of Singletary, but, like, the snaps are still, like, in a position where it makes me a little bit nervous. And like you said, like, even the touches, like Core's getting 3 touches at the goal line. Like, how do we just like lock and load that guy from a cash game perspective? Like, I actually, I mean, most people think that he's a pretty talented back, but does that really matter? Like, I'm not going to play a guy that I can project for 15 touches. Like, you guys have been hearing this since week 1.
That is true. Hey, at least he had 20 last week. It's just whether or not the snaps are going to be there and it's going to continue. I will say between the two of them, the surprising thing is I would actually trust because it comes down to the coach. The coaches, I just don't trust David Montgomery. You're right, Chris, in 2 weeks in a row, but is it going to be 3? I mean, this is a game also where Tariq Cohen game script wise and matchup wise actually profiles a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible. We can't trust Matt Nagy, and that's exactly why Joe's hesitant with both of these backs. And then, it's warranted for sure. But 48 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games. Nobody's allowed more fantasy points to running backs than the Detroit Lions, and 137 rushing yards allowed per game. It does seem like everything is trending in the right direction for David Montgomery. But yeah, it's the Bears offense, it's Trubisky, and it's Matt Nagy. He's frustrated us numerous times. If you're a Montgomery owner in season-long leagues, you've seen it. So,
the Bears.
But yeah, Singletary. I mean, for the snaps, anyways, Gore the last 2 weeks, 29%, 34% of the snaps, and Singletary is getting well over 60% in those last 2 weeks. He basically had 100 yards in the first quarter last week. He is the guy, but there is that threat that for whatever reason they want to put Gore in at the goal line and watch him get stuffed numerous times.
All right, so my running back that we haven't mentioned yet, I can't believe it. You guys want to guess? It's 2 weeks in a row, and now I have to defend the guy that I trashed for the entire beginning of the season because of Joe's complaint. My touches are always the concern with this guy, and last week I was behind him, and that game went out the window. Nobody expected that game to be what it was. And have I given you guys enough hints to guess who I'm talking about?
Aaron Jones?
Yep, Aaron Jones. You just talked about it, Chris, even with the disappointment. Second most on the slate in fantasy points per game. And you talked about the margin between him and Christian McCaffrey, but I think that's what we're looking at here. And if you're talking about the Carolina Panthers this year, you beat them on the ground. That's how you beat the Carolina. Their past defense has been mix and match. It's been like, hey, some weeks it looks really good. Some weeks it's a little bit more susceptible. It's never been really blown off the doors. But if you're looking at a matchup where they do completely struggle in one area, it is against. It's kind of similar to the Chiefs. Like the Chiefs defense is starting to play better against the pass. Like I want running backs against the Panthers, and I want Aaron Jones. I can't believe I'm saying that again 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, I mean recency bias is a thing. He's more of a tournament play for me, but just because of the usage last week. And the one thing that I took away from that game, and I wondered going in because it was 5 straight games where he had at least 4 catches. He had 7 targets and in 4 of those 5 games, and then he comes away with 1 catch on 3 targets, and it was Jamal Williams catching balls out of the backfield. But with Devontae Adams there, I figured he would, steal a lot of those looks. It's a little concerning if you're a DraftKings player. You want that full point for the catch, but I could see it. I mean, you're right. The matchup is nice. You can go back to him in tournaments, but I am a little hesitant in cash.
Yeah, it's a situation where he just feels a little bit too expensive, right? Like I understand that there's like that ceiling there, but even just looking at his ownership so far, like he's kind of like right there with a lot of these other guys that I'm sure we're going to talk about, like Saquon and like Kamara. And I don't know, at that point, I think I'd rather find the salary for, I mean, a lot safer floor and probably a higher ceiling, in my opinion. So he just feels a little bit too expensive, and he could just go nuts and bury me. But I don't know, man. The team total is great, so I guess that's a kind of point in his favor, home favorite, all of that. Carolina, the matchup, like you mentioned, I mean, couldn't be too much better. So yeah, I mean, I think he's totally fine. I think he's a little bit too expensive.
I don't know if you heard it, but he neared 40 and top 40 in 2 games this year. I don't think you get much better ceiling than that.
I guess that's true. I guess like Chris mentioned recency bias. I can't get this 8 attempt thing out of my brain, I guess, when I'm talking about ceiling.
That's certainly fair. All right, so let's talk one more recency bias that neither of you guys brought up. I think the James Conner situation, we know, it's whether or not he practices on Friday, and then obviously Jalen Samuels, if he doesn't, just like last week, is just almost a plug and play. There's a lot of other situations out there. I assume nobody's touching David Johnson and Kenyon Drake against the Buccaneers.
Not in cash.
No.
Not in cash, right. So, all right, so here's where I want to go. You talk about recency bias, Joe, is Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb, now 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, his snap count was down by 60%, slightly over 60%. He did fumble in that game, so you could say, all right, well, that was part of the reason. But then last week, after that, 60% again. And then on a 3rd and 1, not in the game. On the 4th and 1, not at the goal line. But it wasn't even a run on the 4th down, but he wasn't in the game. And now Kareem Hunt is back. Nick Chubb is still a decent matchup here. Is it recency bias? Is this an opportunity? Is he now a tournament play this week? Are you considering him a cash at all, Joe?
Not in cash, but I actually think he's a decent tournament play for some of the reasons that you stated. I think people are going to be scared with Kareem Hunt coming back, of course, but don't you guys think that he probably just slots right into that Mostert? Why can't I say that guy's name? Mostert? Mostert.
Must
start. That's what you're trying to say. He's must start.
I'm not kidding. That guy's name, for whatever reason, I haven't been able to say it for like 3 years. But anyways, I think that he probably just finds himself in that role, at least in the very beginning, right? So at that point, maybe it takes a little bit away from Chubb ceiling, and his pass catching role like already has kind of fluctuated back and forth, which makes him kind of a scary play overall. I don't know. I think he's a fine tournament play because you can still project him for a decent amount of touches and a really strong matchup on the ground. And no one wants to play anyone from Cleveland right now. So at 7K, I mean, I think he's probably got to be right there with kind of the Aaron Jones conversation, don't you think?
Yeah, I think he's an interesting tournament play too. I mean, you guys are right about the matchup. I mean, Football Outsiders has Buffalo's Russ DVOA ranked at 30th. It'll be interesting to see what Freddie Kitchens does with these two backs. How much are they going to be on the field at the same time? Are they really just going to run the ball 35 plus times? I mean, it's very, very possible because Baker's got more picks and touchdowns. He's yet to throw 2 touchdowns in one game. And I'd like to know where Kareem Hunt is on, the projection list, Jake, because he's
on ownership.
Not that I'm interested, but he's bare minimum on both sites. He's $3K on DraftKings. He's $4,500 on FanDuel. We're obviously not suggesting him as a cash game play. It's like one of those contests where you can put in 100 lineups. I mean, does he touch the ball 10 times this week? If he touches the ball 10 times,
6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 23. He's 23.
He's fairly high for a guy we haven't seen all year.
Well, all right, so 2 spots in front of him was going to be the next name I brought up, so I'll save him for a second. But he's right behind J.D. McKissick, right in front of Trey Edmonds, Myles Gaskin, Ty Johnson, LaShawn McCoy. He's in nobody wants him territory. That's really where he is. And Nick Chubb is outside the top 10, and that's part of the reason I brought him up. He is right by Aaron Jones and Jalen Samuels.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'd rather Chubb, but it is interesting.
Right, but I think that's the lowest ownership we've seen in Chubb in a long time, and that's why it kind of presents the tournament opportunity. All right, so we can save this for tournament if the answer is he's tournament only. So if that is your answer, I guess save the rest of your answer. Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah, I mean, the health is the concern, right? If he's healthy,
assuming 100%
health, he's one of the best plays on the slate, I think. I mean, at 6,900,
even in cash,
100%. Yeah, I think he's the guy that stood out like right away. Is the guy that is seeing the usage we want, but he's like very underpriced to me. Matchup solid. The Giants are at least bottom 3rd in the league at defending running backs out of the passing game. I mean, if you can project Le'Veon for 25 touches, 4 or so through the air at 6,900 on both sites, I think he's one of the best plays on the slate from kind of a touch per dollar perspective. Prefer him to a guy like Marlon Mack. Prefer him to a guy like Derrick Henry. Prefer him to both Chubb and Aaron Jones as well, and kind of a similar salary range. I think he's the best one.
I'm a little hesitant. I get all of it. I understand the matchup, the price. It is amazing, but I can't trust him. I can't trust Adam Gase with this offense. I mean, last week was a prime time for him to just to get the ball in the 2 and run it in, and they decided to run some stupid play where Darnold backpedals a bunch and then just tosses a pick. I just can't get there. It's this Giants or this Jets offense it frustrates me. So I mean, if you're a cash game player, you're putting a couple bucks on the line, sure, go for it. But if you're putting not some heavy money head to head, there's no way I'm doing it. I'm not playing Bell as one of my backs, and he does definitely have more upside than a guy like Mac and Derrick Henry. But I feel like at this point, those guys are going to get the ball a little bit more, and I would rather maybe just spend up $200 more and go with Mark Ingram, for example, against the Bengals team. They've allowed 180 rushing yards per game. It's the most in football, and they've allowed 460 yards in 4 straight games. If they allow 460 this week in 5 straight, that's never been done in the history of the NFL, and it's happening. I mean, with Lamar Jackson and Ingram and company, it's just happening. So I'd rather go that way. I want to trust Bell. It's just Gase. It really is.
Well, then I'll be the last one. Joe, Ingram interest?
No. I mean, you know me. I guess would prefer the passing game on that team for sure. And full fade on Ingram.
Full fade in your face, Chris.
By full fade for me, that just
good,
means I'm not playing him on my main team, so it's not that aggressive.
No, it's certainly all right. So let's talk wide receivers then. Chris, you can go first, even though you just went on. But I kind of want to share who gets to go first. No, because I want you to be able to go and not have Joe take your guys. Who are like the top 1 or 2 that you're looking at this week?
Oh, but the top, I mean, obviously is Michael Thomas. But if you're looking to spend some money or save some money, I think there's a couple guys that are pretty interesting in terms of FanDuel in that 6K range, and decent spots on DraftKings as well as in that same game we were talking about Bell, as Jameson, Crowder, and Golden Tate. I like both of those guys. I mean, for Crowder, he's played 5 games with Sam Darnold. He's averaging 7 catches, 9 targets, 66 yards. It's not bad over that span. And about the Giants defense. On the other side, no Evan Ingram. So Golden Tate in there as well. He's got 20 catches, 27 targets in his last 3 games. So those are both guys that I think, you can save a little bit of money. But at the top, I mean, I'm going to try to find a way to get Michael Thomas in a lot of my lineups.
Yeah, I'm with him for sure at Michael Thomas. I think you can project him as being far and away the best play on the slate. I think that Mike Evans is going to be heavily owned up there as well. You get a decent price discount on Mike Evans on DraftKings in particular. But past that, I think that if you wanted to kind of attack this Arizona and Tampa Bay game, which I expect to be an extremely popular route outside of Evans in that game, like Christian Kirk at 5,200, maybe people are going to be scared based on his usage against San Francisco was down quite a bit. But he still feels like a guy that's underpriced at 5,200, along with the Carolina guys. Do you guys have any preference between Christian Kirk versus DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel, like kind of in that mid-range? Like those are the guys I'm looking at right now.
So the Christian Kirk ones, I don't know if you were watching me on the video. I was giving you the heads up for it, but Michael Thomas is number 1. Mike Evans is number 3. Chris Godwin is number 4. Number 2 is Christian Kirk. Everybody is all over smashing the heck out of this. The interesting pivot would actually be Larry Fitzgerald, way down the list. Way down the list by Marquis Brown, Chester Rogers, and Demaryius Thomas. Nobody, if you want you to answer to go, I know we're not talking tournament right now, but if you want the differential piece of this team and piece of this action without being the chalk, Larry Fitzgerald's the value. I know we're kind of skipping ahead there, but that was to answer your question there. The second part of it is I like Christian Kirk a lot. I actually think if there's no Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore becomes interesting. Well, I don't want him to get the defensive attention. The thing is, you have Christian McCaffrey, so it's only so much you can give him. And if you're going to talk about that volume going to one wide receiver, I think it's an interesting play. Is DJ? I've been looking at DJ Moore a lot. Here's one I'll ask you this as a follow-up. And Chris, I want your opinion. I want you to answer Joe's question. So you get 2 questions when we come to you. You get Joe's question and my question that I'm about to ask Joe. When you have a lineup and you're putting it together and you get Christian McCaffrey, does that make you shy away from using DJ Moore? Basically, any combination like that of using a running back and wide receiver on a cash game.
No, I don't really care that much, especially with Christian McCaffrey on the other side of it. I think it's kind of a case-by-case thing. Like, if you think that the running back definitely kind of takes away as far as like what if a game script goes completely wrong and you have a certain running back with a certain wide receiver, I don't think I would ever do that. But McCaffrey is going to be involved regardless of game script, and they do have different roles, right? So I think that it's still totally fine to play DJ Moore and McCaffrey together. It's something that's happened a couple of times in roster construction recently to me. in particular with Carolina, actually, because I like the Carolina defense in most spots too, because they pressure so much. So like playing Christian McCaffrey, the Panthers defense, and then trying to figure out if you want to play DJ Moore versus Curtis Samuel, that's a little bit of a correlation issue for me. So I think that's the one I struggle a little bit more with, outside of just the McCaffrey and wide receiver thing is totally fine.
Yeah, I tend to stay away from that strategy in cash, but even just looking at DJ Moore over the past couple of weeks with McCaffrey balling out, he's been fine, right? 10 targets, 9, 10, 8, catching 7, 6, 5 balls. Had 100 yards last week, so it's obviously very possible that both of these guys can have very good games. But I find it kind of, if it's just a big CMC game, it kind of limits your, the ceiling. But again, both of these guys, especially if there's no Samuel, like you mentioned, Jake, DJ Moore, I think, is a solid play regardless. Look at that price, $5,200. I feel like this could be a sneaky offensive game.
So what about the first question of Kirk versus Moore versus who was the third one that
Curtis
you asked?
Samuel, just the Carolina guys versus Christian Kirk.
Yeah, I like Kirk there, the high total. That's 50 points. And you look at both, everything is jumping at the page. They're both top 5 in terms of passing yards allowed, fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. You bring up a good point. I think with Larry Fitzgerald, people are completely down on him. He's been very, very bad. He doesn't have the same ceiling as Kirk. Kirk is obviously that deep threat. At least 11 targets in 3 of the 6 games he's only played this year. So I don't think Fitz is getting that same type of usage. The ADOT obviously isn't as high. But I do like Kirk, and I actually don't care that he's going to be chalky, because look at last week with the chalk, right? Russell Wilson and Lockett and DK Metcalf were complete chalk. Even at the end of the day with Williams and Parker and Fitz were chalky, and it all worked out. So at that price, I don't mind. It's going to be a shootout.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the Dolphins and the fact that they ended up being pretty chalky by the time we got around to game time. All right, so I love that you brought up Golden Tate. I'm with you on that. I don't understand why people are still so reluctant to buy into Golden Tate, since no Sterling Shepard. You mentioned now no Evan Ingram on top of it. He's just been peppered with targets, and his price is just still disrespectful on top of it. So I'm with you on Golden Tate. Here's the interesting one. You just brought up the Dolphins. It's Devontae Parker. Preston Williams goes down. And as Devontae Parker's price still hasn't gone up that much. Actually, on FanDuel, his price is cheaper than Golden Tate. Are we on Devontae Parker, or is this kind of one of those situations, Joe? We've talked about it on this show. I've talked about it on the Athletic podcast with Chris. I talked about it for years on end. Is that some wide receivers, Tyler Boyd this year, perfect example. Randall Cobb a couple of years ago, perfect example. Some wide receivers, when you're given that much defensive attention, can't handle it. They're not going to break through just because there's a limitation. They're like, not all players are Michael Thomas. So does the loss of Preston Williams pull you off of Devontae Parker, or are you on him for the flip side of now there's no Preston Williams he's going to see so much? Or is the interesting play Albert Wilson?
Well, when you have Mike Gesicki, the alpha on your team, you basically can do whatever you want on the field, right? No one's going to be paying attention to Devontae Parker ever again. No, I actually do kind of think exactly what you were just saying. There's these certain players, like whoever it is, like they really need someone to kind of take some attention away, and whether it's their guys that struggle to separate. I think that Devontae Parker is still one of those guys that he needs someone on the other side to really take that attention away. So I'm a little bit nervous if Devontae Parker is going to be chalk. And I joke about Gesicki, but I think he's going to be popular as well. I'll probably end up on the Gesicki side of that just because he's significantly cheaper at a position where I do try and pay down quite a bit. So I think that he's a great play based on price and the target share that in theory just opened up for him. But I have some worry for sure.
Yeah, some worry too. I probably will be on the Gesicki side as well. And you're right, Joe. I'm sure it will be chalky. But Parker too. The one thing we like about Fitzpatrick is he's not afraid to throw it up. Even if it's double teams, like he does not care. This guy has thrown enough picks in his life to kind of put that out the window. But there's been some consistency from Parker. It's taken a long time. Jake, what'd you say? Like 100 years? It feels like we've been waiting for Parker to show up.
I think I said 7,000.
Yeah, there you go. 55 yards in 6 of his 8 games this year. He's fine in the end zone. He's scoring touchdowns. So if you're going to play CMC and you're going to spend up for Barkley, if you're just going to go all the way up at the top of those two backs, you're going to have to find somebody under 5K at least to plug in there. And you're better off taking a shot with these wideouts than backs. Yeah. So I will have a couple shares. On DK, he's $4,800. It's pretty solid.
So here's the other wide receiver that ties into that. So for everybody that knows, projected ownership right now, Parker's actually sandwiched between the Jets, between Jameson Crowder and Robbie Anderson on either side of him. The one I find interesting is Jarvis Landry is number 10, and so that's strange to me against the Bills. And yeah, I don't understand that one. But the Panthers are right in front of him. Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Julio Jones. I'm saving the name. Cooper Kupp, Godwin, Evans, Kirk, Thomas. So you guys get the idea. Is a lot of people are on the same page. The name I skipped. Do you guys want to take a shot at it? Come on, this should be like
Galladay?
They lost a what? Nope, they lost a wide receiver. He's been doing pretty good for a couple weeks, even with the wide receiver playing. It's in the same game as Devontae Parker.
Oh, Pascal.
Come on. Yep. Zach Pascal. Is this and he ties right into Parker. Is this another one where we have the evidence from last week that he did fine with no T.Y. Hilton, but no, it's the Dolphins, who the Dolphins for some reason were able to, I was going to say stop Robbie Anderson. I don't think they stopped Robbie Anderson. Sam Darnold stopped Robbie Anderson because let's be honest about him. And I know this is going ahead, but again, I like Robbie Anderson for tournament this week because if he makes that catch at the end of the game, it probably turns into a touchdown. Sam Darnold was the problem in that throw. And if he does get that touchdown and that big play, everybody's all over Robbie Anderson and nobody's complaining about him at all. But that's not who we're talking about right now. Zach Pascal in that same conversation of Parker for you, Joe?
Not on FanDuel. FanDuel, he's way too expensive at 6,400 for me. On DraftKings, I think you can make a better argument for him. But I mean, personally, I just would rather go to my boy Hollywood Brown for 200 cheaper. But yeah, I mean, Indy, I think that, I mean, against Miami, like you're gonna have to get this game right, I think, this week, because there's gonna be some ownership after. I don't think there was as much ownership as there should have been last week based on the Miami and kind of just the Jets and debacle in general. I think that there's gonna be people that are on this Indy side of the ball for sure, and that's probably gonna why his ownership so high. But 5,300 for Zach Pascal, just with Hollywood right there, I don't know, it bothers me a little bit.
Oh, I'm gonna come back to Hollywood Brown real quick after Chris gives his answer.
Yeah, Joe's right. I mean, he's an absolute fade on FanDuel. I mean, 70 yards in 3 of his past 5 games, 3 touchdowns is okay. But I just feel like this is going to be a Marlon Mack game, and Brian Hoyer, they're just going to hand it off. I mean, Mack had one game where he had 32 carries, I believe it was against KC. They slowed the pace down. I mean, he's second in the entire league in carries per game. So I just feel like it's going to be a slow-paced game. Marlon Mack, I don't even see a lot of points really on the Colts side of things. So he's a fade for me, but he's okay on DK. But I agree, in that price range, I'd rather just spend down on Kirk, Crowder, Parker, or up on Tate. Like, I'm not going there.
All right, so here's the follow-up to the Marquis Brown thing, Joe. You talk, and I'm not trying to like catch you or anything, but I want your honest opinion here. You always talk with running backs, especially snaps and opportunities and everything like that. Is the 57% snap for Marquis Brown last week? Are you just attributing that to not just being 100% healthy, or is that coming back of your mind as just a little bit of a concern because he was behind Willie Snead, and who led the team in snap percentage? Nick freaking Boyle at 84. Mark Andrews, because we're about to go to tight end anyway, so bring this in as well. Mark Andrews was down at 34%, even behind Hayden Hurst last week.
Yeah, it worries me a lot more for Mark Andrews, I think, than for Hollywood. I mean, I think that, yeah, snaps are really important, but at the same time, like, a position like wide receiver where you're going to be getting far fewer opportunities anyway. I think that you want those opportunities to be like strong opportunities. And I think that he's going to be the guy that, I mean, they didn't have him last time they played against Cincinnati. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think that, I mean, this could be a spot where he just completely explodes. Like, this is the one I don't want to miss out on this week, I feel like.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He just hasn't played a lot of snaps all year.
Yeah.
Well, even in week 1, I don't know the number offhand, but I feel like it was close to 15, right? He just didn't play a lot of snaps. He's dealing with the foot injury, was away from the team in camp. But yeah, we're talking tournaments, right? I mean, I don't think we're playing Brown in cash, but the opportunity is definitely there. Just mentioned the Bengals and all the yardage they've given up. No, I know we're on cash, but I'm not. I'm saying
no. But I think Joe was saying he would pay down for him in cash because he was just $200 from Pascal.
No one's listening to me for cash takes because I don't play a ton of cash anyway. So if you're trying to get your wide receiver picks in cash games from me, like you're probably in the wrong area. I mean, I know who the plays are, but am I going to pull the trigger on them? Probably not. I'd rather just take the upside with someone like Hollywood is what I mean by that.
Okay, then let's get to tight end. And to answer your guys' questions from before, Mike Gesicki, and it's not even close, is the number 1 projected tight end.
Wow, let's go. We made it, guys. Week 10.
Yes. Yeah, we made it all right.
15% right now. Next closest is 11% Travis Kelce, 10% Austin Hooper. He's got a 4% gap on freaking Travis Kelce right now. So are we plugging and playing? Is it that simple, Joe? I mean, I think that's the end of the question.
Price is fantastic still, 3,100 for him. I mean, there's going to be the upside just because he's a strong athlete. Like maybe he's finally like putting it together. And I think the point that makes the most sense, I think, with this Gesicki play is Ryan Fitzpatrick. Like you said, he's not scared to just like try and fit it into windows to this guy. So if he's going to be getting more opportunities, I mean, I think 3,100 for a guy that's still top 5 in routes run over the last 4 games, and that's something that we care about a lot at the position. Like I wouldn't be shocked if Mike Gesicki saw like 7-8 targets in this spot. Would you guys?
No, I would expect that.
There is one I like more than him because he's cheaper on FanDuel. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, interested to see who that is, but yeah, on FanDuel, I think he's $5,300. It's almost like, oh man, I'll just spend up for Kelce. It's 67, but yeah, if you're a DraftKings player, there's such a huge gap in terms of pricing. It does make a lot of sense. I mean, we mentioned him, I think, just kind of tongue in cheek last week of somebody who's trending up, and then he has that monster game, the 95-yard game. It's a career game for him for sure, but at least 41 yards in 3 of his last 4. We mentioned Williams already out of the lineup. If Parker can't handle that top coverage, then I mean, why not Gesicki? I don't mind him either, but I definitely like Kelce with what looks like Patrick Mahomes coming back. If I'm going to get Mahomes or Kelce with a lower ownership than Gesicki, I mean, sign me up.
Can I take a shot at who your guy is on FanDuel?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, guys. I'm with you on DraftKings, 100%. I don't know how you get away from $3,100 on DraftKings. Problem is $100 cheaper.
Jack Doyle.
Is Jack Doyle. You talk about running all the routes and you talk about all the snap count. He's near the top of the team in snap counts. He's been running more routes and more snaps and involved more than Eric Ebron has the past couple of weeks on top of it. And now you have what is another voided week by T.Y. Hilton. I love Gesicki, but if you're going to give me Jack Doyle $100 cheaper, like that's just, I'm going to go team by team here, even if it's Brian Hoyer at quarterback. With Brian Hoyer, similar to Fitzpatrick. Yeah, I was going to say, Brian Hoyer, if you go back and look 2 years ago when he was with the 49ers, he had 2 300-yard games because he's very much like in Fitzpatrick, where this is something D'Angelo Williams said, and I'm trying to pimp that podcast that I do with him, but he talks about this all the time. He said that his problem with what Gardner Minshew is doing, although I joked with Chris, I guess I should raise this jersey into the rafters, Joe, until next season with the Beowulf. Yeah. But he was saying with Gardner Minshew at any backup quarterback, Fitzpatrick now, Brian Hoyer, if he plays, is they're playing with house money. They can come in and do whatever the hell they want because who cares? Like, they don't care. What are they going to do? Lose their job back to the starter in the first place? They're going to come in and play with house money. Brian Hoyer is going to throw it. So I actually like Jack Doyle a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think that even past all that, the matchup's really solid. Like the price on both sites is still very obtainable. Like I think that's the spot where I would prefer to go in comparison to a guy like Pascal. And I think if Pascal's gonna be a lot heavier owned than Jack Doyle, that's still the route I would like to go. But I mean, just getting back to like super basic stuff at tight end, high team totals, they are at home. Like target share should be there. Like he's underpriced for sure. I think a lot of really sharp people were on Doyle last week, and I'd be shocked if a lot of those people, or at least all of those people, just go straight to Mike Gesicki. So I like both those guys down there.
Same for you, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Doyle's definitely in play for sure on both sites.
Doyle rules. Plus, you can
Doyle rules. Yeah, let's do it.
Anyway, I mean, we're really looking anywhere else at tight end unless you're paying up. I mean, is this what we're doing?
Yeah, it's Kelce. Yeah. I actually don't mind Hooper. Again, he's been so consistent. It looks like Matt Ryan's going to come back. And even without Matt Ryan there, he had 65 yards and a touchdown. He's got a touchdown in 3 straight games, 5 of 6. So I don't mind him.
I don't feel love like Hooper this week. The Saints have just been they've just been shutting everything down this year.
Yeah, I won't go there in cash, but I actually don't mind it in tournaments just being a little off the board. But I would play the other 3 that we've talked about in terms of Kelce and Gesicki and Doyle over him.
Okay, well then last one before we get to quarterbacks. What about Gerald Everett? Yeah, seemed he was a hot name 2 weeks ago, and everybody's pulling back.
His routes are down a little bit. I think the reason, at least that I personally liked him, is he was kind of still hovering around like that top 5 or so like routes run over the last 4, and now he's all the way down to 95 routes over the last 4 games. Like I think that the matchup against Pittsburgh is really tough. 3rd in DVOA against tight ends, and he's just way more expensive than some of these other guys we've been talking about. So he's 5,700 on FanDuel. He's 4,500 on DraftKings. I think he's a little bit priced out for me. But yeah, if you want to kind of get to that range, like you'll get way lower ownership on Gerald Everett than some of these other guys we mentioned.
Jake, what about Rhett Ellison, $2,500?
Someone mentioned that on YouTube earlier today, and I literally like looked at it and I was like, oh god, if that's the chalk, this is terrifying.
I don't know how where is he on that list? I mean,
that's what I was about to say. I was about to look where he is. Evan Ingram still inside the top 15, so he hasn't.
He's already rolled out.
Yeah, I know. That was going to say there's not been enough movement yet. He's still down by Delaney Walker and Charles Clay. And
That's how I started my morning. I looked at my phone and saw I had a comment on the YouTube video, and it was like Rhett Ellison chalk week ? And I was just like, oh no, I'm just gonna go back to sleep.
Yeah,
there's no way.
For sure.
Oh, that's why you just turn
around. You may have to,
Yeah.
if you're going CMC and Barkley again, just plug him in on DK. You got $4K left to spend on the rest of your roster.
Actually, in all seriousness, I know Simonson I think he's on IR and not eligible to return, especially because they already used that elsewhere. But I think they picked up Caden Smith from the 49ers. So just knowing the Giants, it's always going to be the tight end you don't want. So like with Rhett Ellison 2 weeks ago scoring instead of Evan Ingram against the freaking Cardinals. But quarterbacks, any interest, if you can find the money, to getting up to what is probably one of the cheaper prices you've ever seen on Patrick Mahomes, Joe?
Yeah, I love it, especially if everyone's just going to pay all the way up for Lamar Jackson, who I think is definitely the best raw points play. But I think you always like get a decent discount in price and on ownership on these guys coming back from injury. And there's a lot of value in like being early on this again. Like I don't think like you saw Mahomes jumping around after they won the game last week. Like he seems like if he was forced to, probably could have played last week as well. I think they were just being cautious with him. So I'm not worried about him coming back and not being at full strength. Like pretty decent total there. Like still, like if we're just looking again, like let's keep it really simple. Like yards per attempt. Like this is a guy that like he's still Patrick Mahomes. He's 7K. Like maybe we get in on him a week early, and like you said, get a little bit of a discount.
Yeah, he's 84, just $100 behind Lamar Jackson on FanDuel. So they're doing their diligence on that one.
Sure.
But before I get to you, Chris, I have him actually in a DraftKings lineup where I'm playing him naked. Because I'm not trying to predict if it's Kelsey or it's Hill or it's Watkins or now this week it's going to be DeMarcus Robinson. I'm just playing naked Mahomes.
Or Damien. Yeah. No,
or Damien.
Hey, it's possible at this point. Yeah, I don't mind.
It's going to be somebody.
Yeah, Daryl. It could be, and who cares if you just play Mahomes? Who cares who it is? He's got all his weapons there. He's coming back, and I wonder what his ownership will be because of the injury and the fact that before he got hurt, he wasn't phenomenal. It was 1 or 0 touchdowns in 3 or 4 games. It wasn't the Mahomes at the start of the season. There were some struggles. Of course, the offensive line was brutal. They seem to be getting some guys back which will help him out. But I also
do you want to guess where he is
with Mahomes? 5th.
Close, Joe.
He's got to still be kind of close to the top, right? 4th, 3rd.
Nope. Keep going. 7th.
Interesting.
Yeah. Kyler Murray's number 1. Number 2, which I think is would have been my assumption for the chalkiest play this week. Although Kyler Murray makes a lot of sense at the other side of the ball. I think it's Jameis Winston, and I have no problem with even in cash tournaments, whatever, because I look at the fact that if you can turn the ball over 5 times and still score double-digit points, I'm not that scared of you.
Yeah.
Right. And Winston's thrown the ball 141 times in his last 3 games, over 1,000 yards and 5 TDs over that span. That's an average of 47 throws per game. The run game is still non-existent. We're talking about Ronald Jones. We're getting excited about him having 20 touches. He really still didn't do a whole lot. And people are in the fantasy community. They're getting a little fired up about Ronald Jones. But yeah, he's got 2 top 5 wide receivers and a beautiful matchup. So I love Jameis as well. And if Kyler is the chalk, I'm going the other way with Jameis.
I think Jameis is fine. I prefer Kyler on that side. Like you guys don't need to hear me say how much I love just the rushing upside from Kyler. But I guess the biggest discrepancy between these 2 plays is Kyler doesn't throw deep and Winston is just gonna chuck it. There's a lot of value in that. He's at home, massive total. It is against Arizona, so like if there was a spot to I guess pay a premium for Jameis Winston, like this is it. 6,800. With Lamar only 500 away seems bad, but I think you could get there with that pretty easily just with the amount of attempts they're going to be in this game.
Well, I love his price on
rushing
FanDuel.
Upside too, Jake.
Yep.
With Winston, 53 rushing yards 2 weeks ago. I know he doesn't.
Yeah.
It's not the same
as
Kyler,
consistent.
but yeah, it's not consistent, but it's still there. If you had a choice between Evans and Godwin, I feel like last week we were talking about sometimes it's hard for both of them. I feel like with Patrick Peterson, will Godwin be I mean, you just gave up the numbers. They're both in the top 5, but I almost feel like this could be a Godwin week.
It could be, but we've also started to see that I don't know if it was at this show, Chris, because I know I was talking about with you, but the whole theory behind putting the top corner on the second best receiver and then double covering the top corner or the top wide receiver. And why don't more teams do that? Some former player brought that up. But I just don't know that Arizona doesn't think about possibly doing that and saying, all right, well, Godwin's got less experience and less proven history than Evans. So, so I don't know which way to go in this game, but that's why the lineup on FanDuel that I have Winston in, he's naked too. Got a lot of naked quarterbacks this week.
You're just not taking a stand on any of these guys, eh? I guess that's the way to do it, though. Just get the quarterback and whatnot. But yeah, I think the Godwin thing, I don't care as much about the cornerback stuff, but that's a good point that you made there with Patrick Peterson. One thing that I'm kind of paying attention to, like these really expensive wide receivers, I always get a little bit nervous to pay up for a higher ADOT guy. So someone like Mike Evans, who's going to be seeing more throws downfield. Like, yeah, there's a lot of value in that, but to me, there's more value in that at cheaper mid-range wide receivers, because if they dud, it's not going to bury your entire lineup. So if I'm going to pay up, right, I would much rather pay up for a guy like Godwin, just because of his usage more than anything. So the Mike Evans thing always is going to terrify me in single entry stuff.
Yeah, and that's, we were talking cash. I would certainly, if I'm going to do a tournament, Chris, I would try to pair Winston up with somebody, obviously. Sure. But it could always be the wrong hit. I'm with Joe on that. I'd rather look for the Tate, Edelman volume guys, or if I'm going, like you just said, the ADOT, the deep plays, all that type of stuff, air yards, which, hey, should pour one out for the website, but you can still get his information. Hopefully Josh brings it back around, and hopefully that fixes things, because that's a great resource for anybody out there that's trying to get better at the game. I think that if you look at it, I'm with Joe on that. If I'm going to go for that, it's because of the mid guys. Like, that's why I think that like Devontae Parker is interesting, because he's a mid guy, but we talked about him from a different angle. So for tournament plays, anything different here quarterback wise, or are we attacking the same quarterbacks? Chris, you better not bring up his name, because I've been trying to warn you. He's only got 2 good games this year. Like, and last week was a disappointment yet again. Don't say it. Don't say it.
Okay, I won't say it.
Because if you do, his last name is not Dimes. It's disappointment.
Yeah, I'm not touching him. Drew Brees. Can we bring up Drew Brees? Let's bring him up. I mean,
that's a good one to bring up, because, and I'll let you go with it, Chris, is when we talk about all these other quarterbacks so far, you just said that even like Winston, he occasionally will run. Drew Brees isn't going to run. Like Matt Ryan, not going to run. And both of those are inside the top 10 projected ownership because of the game.
Yeah, not going to run. And we know about the home and away splits. I mean, he's only played parts of 3 games, but I mean, his first one at home, 370, and then his last one against Arizona, 373. Great matchup. This one's a great matchup too. I mean, we got Alvin Kamara coming back this week, catches out of the backfield. Latavius has been strong as well, and you got Michael Thomas there. Jared Cook coming back. You get the deep threat in Ted Ginn. So I like Drew Brees. There's really not a whole lot to say, and not breaking news here. Drew Brees is a great quarterback, and he's got a great matchup.
Oh, timeout, Joe. Hold on. As I swiftly transitioned to GPP, I forgot to do something.
You down with GPP?
Yeah, I am. I can't do the voice. Go, Joe.
Yeah, I think a guy we didn't mention, and he probably was like right on the borderline of like, can you even fathom this in cash? But I mean, is it Brian Hoyer week? 5,900. He's super, like, he's in a weird salary range because he's not quite as cheap as someone like Ryan Tannehill, but at a position where if you're not paying up for some of these studs we've mentioned, like paying down always makes some sense. I think that Indy just, I'm always attracted to Indy's quarterbacks for some reason, just because they have such a strong offensive line. Not that that really matters, because Miami is not going to pressure a ton anyway, but a decent team total there for Indy. I mean, they can be beat obviously pretty much anywhere you want through the air. I mean, third string, I was gonna say backup, third string quarterback, I guess, for Indy to start the year. So I don't know if a lot of people will go there, but in a week where, like, we're talking about all these plays, like, roster construction is extremely tight. Have you guys tried to build a lineup yet? It's not easy. So I think that it might be difficult to get to like I understand that Kyler and like all these plays up there, Winston, they're expensive. So like, you're not going to get in these running backs that I'm trying to play. So I'm kind of trying to scavenge for a cheaper option at quarterback. Is there any cheaper ones you guys like?
Yeah, I got one. You want to go, Chris, first? Because I wrote up Brian Hoyer in my seasonal. DFS wise, if I'm going this far down, there is one that I like more.
Who is it?
Tannehill?
Who is it?
I don't know if you want to go. He is Brian Hoyer. Projected ownership is between Fitzpatrick and Trubisky right now. He is actually number 10. So there you go. Drop 3 spots and drop $100. Sam Darnold. I'm doing it. Like if I'm going down to Brian Hoyer, I'm going to drop another $100 and I'm going to Sam Darnold. He's looked god awful this year. There's no other way to put it. However, again, I go back to that one play. The game wasn't that bad last week from a fantasy perspective, where if he also connects on that one play with Robbie Anderson, I think we're having a different conversation and people are going to be on him more so than Daniel Jones on the flip side of the ball, because you know which team has given up the most plays of 40 plus yards to wide receivers? The Giants. You know what team has the worst rated cornerback in all the NFL, and DeAndre Baker? The Giants. You know what team can't stop the passing game, can't stop the run, can't stop a damn thing on earth? The Giants.
Man, we couldn't be further away on this one. I'm not on the Sam Darnold train this week. I think that if he was going to have a kind of spot where he was going to rebound, last week was the week where he needed to prove something. 6.2 yards per attempt, nothing on the ground. Yeah, 58, maybe he's like 4K, I would consider it, but he's way out of priced out for me. Chris?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of interest in any of these guys. There doesn't seem to be somebody jumping off the page like Fitzpatrick did last week. Like I said, I feel like it's going to be a lot of Marlon Mack. I suppose Hoyer, you want to do a Hoyer, Doyle, or Pascal, or just Hoyer in general. I mean, that's where I would lean between the three. If Evan Ingram was playing, maybe I would go Jones, but I get it. Recency bias is completely a thing with Sam Darnold. There's been so much nonsense with him over the past couple of weeks, but I don't know. I do like Crowder, I guess, but
so I will say this. Like, you asked me if I'm paying that far down, and this is just basically him versus Hoyer, and I do like Hoyer. I just mentioned that. I said whoa, and sorry, Chris, I didn't mean to do that while you were talking. But
breaking news there.
No, well, I mean, for all intents and purposes, the lowest projected ownership quarterback at 0% right now. Obviously, I mean, it's probably like 0 point something behind Ryan Finley, behind Kyle Allen, behind Baker Mayfield, and a hurt Jacoby Brissett. Matthew Stafford. If you're going to give you Matthew Stafford at 0%, I will stack him with Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones. I don't think it's going to happen, but if you're going to give me 0%, he's going to end up in one of my lineups as a tournament play, Joe.
He's an interesting one for sure. I think that he's someone that I haven't played enough of this year, to be completely honest. He's like everyone's got that guy that they just like feel like they missed out on, and then they're just like almost like doubling down. 2 straight years. Well, it's doubling down. I'm like, I feel like I'm doubling down a little bit because like hopefully just like please make the Matthew Stafford thing stop, because like he always seems like he's a little bit too expensive and doesn't run. It's really hard to hate on that play.
You know what this is? This is your personality, because you like to see people punished when they don't use Christian McCaffrey.
100%.
So you just like to see people get punished.
I mean, do you disagree? I think that it's been every single week.
No, but he's got 10 touchdowns in his last 3 games, Chris.
Top 5 quarterback.
And people are punishing me every single week when I don't play
saying that.
So.
We pushed you to 6.
Yeah, I've been pumping Matthew Stafford's tires for a while because there's no run game, and his secondary is giving up the most passing yards per game in the NFL. So he's just going to continue to draw back and throw the ball. For Ty Johnson, J.D. McKissick, these guys can't run between the tackles. When they get the ball, it's mostly just dump off. So he's got 2 solid weapons. He's got a tight end that's kind of trending up. I mean, he had a decent game last week in DJ Hawkinson. So I don't hate it. He wasn't really on my radar because it's the Bears, and it seems like it's a tough matchup. But who have the Bears play? We kind of mentioned this last week with Wentz. I mean, Joe Flacco, Case Keenum, Derek Carr, who has, by the way, has been pretty good. Teddy Bridgewater, Phillip Rivers, and Carson Wentz didn't have a great game, but he started off strong, and then they just leaned on the run game against Chicago. I don't hate that at 0%. Yikes! It's just a tournament play though. I wouldn't do it in cash.
Well, of course, but that's the whole appeal here. All right, so running backs for you, Chris. Are we doing much different from cash, or was there somebody we didn't mention? I know one. I'm saving this name for Joe specifically. You better not take it. Actually, should I just go to Joe first?
Yeah, go to Joe. I might take it.
Joe, you haven't brought up Alvin Kamara.
I was just gonna say that's the only guy that's on the list that we haven't talked about yet. But 8,200. I mean, talking about guys that like weren't rushed back, like I think that he's a guy that should be ready to go after their bye, right? So I mean, massive total there. It is Atlanta. Like, how many times have we just like seen Alvin Kamara just completely like destroy this Atlanta defense? So yeah, I mean, they're at home. Like, if we didn't have Christian McCaffrey, Saquon at the top and whatnot, like, and there was a ton of all the salary in the world, you just play all 3 of these guys. Like, but you're gonna have to probably make a decision. But 8,200 for Kamara, I think he's gonna be extremely chalky.
Well, yeah. What's his ownership? I don't know. He should be chalky, but I wonder what people feel about Kamara and Latavius balling out, and the fact that they're double-digit point favorites at home. We could get a lot of Latavius in the fourth, and he only has 2 touchdowns on the year. So I just wonder if people are willing to spend 82. I am.
Well, you've won both the bets on where do you think they are so far. I mean, granted, by playing maybe like Price is Right rules, but so do you want to guess first where he is, Chris? You've been hitting these. Joe?
He's got. I mean, now you guys have me nervous. I thought he was going to be chalky. Now I guess think he's even a better GPP play. I'll say he's 10th.
Oh no, you should have done the Prices Right. You should have like undercut him because he's 5th.
There you go.
Yeah.
Interesting.
$1.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so does that change your opinion at all, Joe? That he's 5th?
No, not a ton. I still think that, like, if people are worried about the Latavius thing, like, I guess I understand that, but like at the same time, like, how many times did he just like ball out with Ingram on the team last year? I get that Ingram had probably one of the worst single seasons we could have projected behind that elite offensive line, but yeah, I'm not super worried about it. I think that, again, like, quality of touches, like, he's someone that they're going to make sure they get the ball, and the touchdown thing, like, that for sure is something that he's gonna progress at some point. I think that it could be like a massive Kamara game's coming. We haven't had him, I feel like, in so long that people are forgetting that this guy can break the slate like pretty quickly.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
and quality of touches. If you're going to tell me him versus Saquon Barkley at a more expensive
100%.
price, I'm taking Alvin Kamara.
100%.
Yeah, for sure. No, I agree. I was just bringing up all those points. Like, he only needs 10 touches in this game to rack up 100 yards and score twice. And Joe's absolutely right. I mean, he has just destroyed the Falcons over the past couple of years.
Yep. All right. So wide receivers. What are we back to Joe here?
Yeah. So there's a couple guys. I think at the wide receiver position, you can make arguments for, I mean, a good chunk of some of the guys we've talked about for cash games for tournaments as well. I'm kind of interested. Yeah, I think the one guy we haven't touched on that makes a lot of sense, Sammy Watkins. Again, someone that I haven't played much of over the years, but his price seems like it's at a spot now. If we could kind of get, I guess, early on the KC offense with Mahomes back, I feel like a lot of these guys, they haven't been priced back to where they should be with Mahomes back behind center. So I'm interested in Watkins. His target share is still pretty decent, and depending on his ownership, I think he could end up being a really nice play at that price point.
All right, you got to hit one of these, Joe. What do you think his projected ownership is?
Oh, God. I'm like so like screwed up with ownership now because last week I thought that the Seahawks were going to be super chalky and then they weren't. So now I'm just like totally messed up by
Who do you think has a higher projected ownership of Robert Woods, Sammy Watkins, and Albert Wilson?
It's got to be Sammy Watkins, right?
Chris? It better be Sammy. I'll go with Woods.
Well, you're both wrong. All three are tied. But that's the point. He's down there, and this is behind. So I'll give you guys in front of him now. Behind Marvin Jones, behind a banged up and not knowing what's going on with AJ Green, behind Larry Fitzgerald, behind Chester Rogers, behind your boy Marquis Brown. So that was why my initial response, because I just happened to do a Control F and do it quickly. When you said his name, I went ugh, because I can't believe I'm in on it. I hate being in on Sammy Watkins.
He's going to have to get rid of the naked Mahomes.
Never feels good.
The last 2 games with Matt Moore, 18 targets and 12 catches. He just seems to be healthy again. And we know his upside. Look at week 1, right? Almost 200 yards in that one game. So I'm interested in him as well. I think it's a good call. Where's Ted Ginn Jr. on that list? Control F him. It's probably like 200.
You know what? I don't want Ginn with Traquan back, especially because Ted Ginn looks around 20. He's right Calvin Ridley and Allen Robinson. And for that ownership, high. I'd rather go to Traquan.
Yeah, I was just looking for some because I want to fit in CMC and Barkley and Kamara kind of wherever I can. So I was just looking at some cheap guys into that range. I mean, he's $3,700. Played 2 games with Breeze, and I know Smith hasn't been around for them, but 10 targets, 143 yards, 9 grabs. You know, he's a boomer bust guy. He's going to take one shot down the field for sure with Ginn against the Falcons.
So let me throw 2 names at you guys then. One is super cheap and one is super expensive, and one is super talented and one is question mark because we haven't seen a ton from him. So the super expensive one is any interest into squeaky wheel, losing his mind on the sideline, but at least doing it by himself, Joe, and Odell Beckham against Tre'Davious White and the Bills?
His price has gotten to a point where, like, we talked about this, I think, like 3 or 4 weeks ago, where it's like at some point, maybe he just has to be in play just because of his target share and his salary.
6,100.
He was like one of the guys that, like, he's still, like, last week, like, looking through some of the guys, like Keenan Allen, like those type of guys that I thought would be a little bit lower owned that ended up not being low owned. Like Odell Beckham still, like, no one wants to play this guy. So from a tournament perspective, like, he seems like he's Maybe he's not right as far as like his health, which is a little bit of concern. Obviously, the tough matchup against Tre'Davious White, and like you won't look at anything really from a data perspective that's going to make you want to click Odell Beckham. But I think if you're playing large field stuff, having at least a couple shares would make some sense.
Yeah, I think maybe next week with another, I'm expecting another dud performance and be even cheaper and what will be a better matchup. Maybe everyone will be on him at that point. Maybe, backpedaling here a little bit. Maybe now is the time to get on him where nobody is. And I think that's why you're seeing Jarvis Landry projected, what was he, 10th? I think that's exactly why, because Odell's likely going to get shut down. He's been shut down by top corners all year long. And I don't even think it's on him. There were a couple plays last week where he was wide open. And again, Baker just does not have that time. And for whatever reason, Baker is not after that first read and he doesn't have it.
Well,
it's game over for him.
So I'm going to tease the show, and this isn't like not trying to pit my. This is legitimately, if you just only listen to one segment of the To Be Honest show with D'Angelo Williams and myself, go listen when we were talking about Odell Beckham, because he brought this up. I'll give you a quick version. He said it goes down to practice, and the problem is at practice. He said they did the same thing with Steve Smith when he was on the team with the Panthers. They did the same thing with Antonio Brown. And what they do in practice is they say, let's run, blah, 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 play X, blah, whatever. And then they said, in this situation, it's third and whatever, he's likely double covered. And so what happens is when you have Cam Newton, though, and you have Ben Roethlisberger, that doesn't carry over to game day because they're experienced enough. When you have somebody inexperienced like Baker Mayfield, he's almost kind of tuning out Odell Beckham from practice inherently. And the problem is they need to fix his mind and get him back looking at Odell Beckham. And if you watch some of the games, that's the thing. He's not even looking at Odell Beckham. So super insightful. In the long form version, go listen to it. So the other name, Chris, is somebody that's down in the $3,000 range. And when he came in, hint, hint, for the game, now this is target percentages and the times you're targeted while snaps on the field. He did have a high snap percentage as well because they run a lot of three wide, but Josh Reynolds had 14.5 target percentage when Brandon Cooks came out of that game. Now, is that necessarily going to carry over with Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp into every single game and Gerald Everett? But you brought up the concern with Gerald Everett before, Joe. Are you in on Josh Reynolds? Because I am for that price.
Yeah, I think it's a good price. I think I always want to try and be transparent with my biases. And Josh Reynolds during the playoffs last year, I'm a big playoff DFS player in general, and he just completely buried me in that game where he was like super chalky. He's kind of he's on my list of like guys that I just like try and X out mentally. But yeah, the price is really good, really solid for sure. With not a lot kind of down in that range. And I will be completely honest, I was trying to fit in my last wide receiver for my FanDuel team, and he was one of the guys that if I had $100 more, I could have made work, and I probably would have done it. So for what it's worth.
There you go.
Yeah, I was looking at him too. It makes a lot of sense. He's the deep threat guy, and you got to figure Pittsburgh is going to have a lot. They're going to have a lot of attention on Cooper Kupp, and they got some pretty good players in their secondary. So, it makes sense. I don't mind it either, Jake. I like it a little bit more on DK.
Okay. Tight ends? Anybody we didn't name from before? Chris Herndon, if he actually plays. Advanced refrigeration, as Pat Mayo would say.
Yeah. Herndon was active last week, but he put the big 0. So,
because I don't even think he stepped on the field. I think he was active.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I think that was, I kind of think it was like one of those running back situations where he was, it's kind of like David Johnson, the 1 week against the Giants. I think it was kind of like active if necessary type of situation. So if active and fine in practice on a Friday, you don't get, all right, well then how about hear this, Chris? Everybody wants to do it. The Tyler Eifert trap from earlier this season against the Cardinals. It's now OJ Howard's back, but OJ Howard hasn't been used. Are you going to put yourself in the trap of the OJ Howard Cameron Brate situation, Chris?
No. How Joe feels about Reynolds is how I feel about OJ Howard. He's ticked me off too much to even bother with him. He's been in decent spots before, and I'm not going there. Cameron Brate looks like he's going to be healthy and active in this game as well. So not for me. Gesicki's a little bit cheaper. Jonnu Smith doesn't look like Delaney Walker. You got to figure KC's going to put up 30 points against Tennessee, right? Somebody's got to catch the ball there. If it isn't if it isn't just the run game, they're going to have to throw, and I don't think it's going to be Dion Lewis. One of these guys is going to have to catch the ball, whether it's Jonnu Smith or AJ Brown.
There's one more guy, and this is going to be since I can't talk about Noah Fant, by the way, Noah Fant, if you missed it, make sure you go ahead and check out his tackle breaking ability. I'm gonna go ahead and say Noah Fant's good. Maybe Cleveland's not that bad at tackling, but that's my opinion. That's one man's opinion. But anyways, I'm always trying to think of these plays based on where the chalk's going to be too. So Mike Gesicki's 3,100. Is there a price pivot around that range? Someone that's still running routes, someone that has a decent matchup. You guys are going to have to explain this one to me because he looks pretty good on my sheet. Things that I value. Trey Burton at 2,800. Is he even in play? Is he hurt? Okay, good. Because that was the guy that I would have probably forced myself to play. But if he's hurt, I don't even have to consider it.
No, Matt Nagy came out this past week and said he's still not 100% since his offseason surgery.
Perfect. Ignore the last 10 seconds. But
if you haven't seen him play, you haven't been watching the games. He looks like Jason Witten running rounds. Let's just put it that way.
Tough. So
and if you watch Jason Witten against the Giants, I would call running. I'd put that in heavy quotes.
He threw a touchdown pass in the Super Bowl, and then the Bears paid him like suckers.
Yeah. That's I thought before you said the price point, I thought you're going to bring in the worst guy in the history of the world at tight end because everybody's off of him. So that means he's going to smash this week. And Jared Cook, that's what he does. Nobody wants him, and now he's going to smash.
And Jared Cook won me a lot of money when he played for the Packers that year in playoffs. You remember that, Jake? That was the week you told me to play Terrence Williams, I think, as like a punt wide receiver, and it ended up taking down the 1,500 in playoffs. You've got to remember this. But Cook was on my team, so I'm a Cook guy. But
I'm still waiting for my share of that money.
It was spent about 3 hours after I won it. Basically.
Immediately after on a Jared Cook jersey.
Yeah, have to do it.
All right. Well, let's we'll combine these last two. And maybe I'll just play the drops back to back. But let's talk about our lineups. And I'm assuming that might have some stacks.
You don't care about defense?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I always forget about defense. I don't know why.
Defense.
I know. Who you got, Chris? You brought him up.
Well, the Ravens just seem too expensive to get in there. But, I mean, if you can find a way, like their defense is starting to take shape. It really is. Getting some guys back healthy. You saw what they did last week against Brady. Again, this isn't breaking news, but before Andy Dalton was benched, nobody had been sacked more than him, and now they're throwing Ryan Finley into the fire. And so that's a rough spot. But I'm looking at this Buffalo and Cleveland game too. I mean, both quarterbacks turn the ball over a ton. And I mentioned Baker doesn't have a game with 2 passing touchdowns. He leads the league in picks. On the other side, the same thing with Josh Allen, picks and fumbles. So I like both of their defenses as well. And the Bills are pretty cheap at 2,900.
Yeah, I'm on that game for defense for sure. I think that Cleveland's super interesting at that price point. Another thing that I like to do quite a bit, and I think this Arizona and Tampa Bay game is going to draw a ton of ownership. There's definitely going to be a lot of passing. Arizona's only 2,200. They're a team that, if we're just looking at pressure rate, shout out Sports Info Solutions, giving me a bunch of awesome pressure rate data throughout the week. They're one of the top teams in regards to that. Jameis is someone that I would love to target just because of his interceptions, and he'll take sacks as well. So I think that the defense for the Cardinals at 2,200 in particular stands out. I get that they're on the road, they're an underdog, but I mean, in a week where we're really starving for salary, I think they make a lot of sense too.
Yeah, I love that call too.
I got one for you guys. Double-digit points in 6 straight games. Double-digit turnovers by the quarterback who does not know how to read a defense. The Pittsburgh Steelers against Jared Goff.
I knew you were going to do that. I knew you were going
of course.
There. No, yeah,
why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially with the fact that I can't believe they're not even inside the top 10. They're way down on projected ownership. What? Come on, people, get on. Pittsburgh Steelers, Jared Goff, easy pick right there. All right, are we good, Chris? Can I go now?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, I forgot. I'm not. All right, so let's combo this.